Hello and welcome to a special YouTube live stream here at Establish and Run. My name is Adam Levitan. I am joined by one of the best, Michael Leone. We may be joined in a minute by Justin Herzig if he can figure out his hemp internet. But either way, we will review the Underdog draft of a very special ETR subscriber. I personally love these reviews. I think it's more valuable and easier to improve with post-draft analysis rather than the live stream version. Michael, good morning. How's it going?
Good morning. The live streams are tough now too, because people just join your draft too, and it doesn't really replicate the average draft. So right. It's the reviews. I'm starting to come to the dark side of the review being better than the live stream.
Yeah. Okay. A few things before we start. First, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button down below. Helps us continue to create free content like this. Second one, anyone who has a draft kit has access to free money on Underdog Fantasy. Please take it. Literally free money. There's a link below with instructions on how to take it. Third, highly recommend reading Justin Herzig's latest article on Establish and Run on his exposure so far, his reasonings, and his strategy going forward. Link to that is below as well. And most importantly, wanted to give a big shout out to the subscriber, Connor O'Driscoll, aka Driko out. He won the honor of getting roasted here today by being our Discord member of the month in June. If you're a subscriber and you're not in the Discord, you're missing out on a bunch of alpha through the props channel, discussion, direct access, et cetera, et cetera. Be sure to get in there. All right. We're going to talk about the Cam Akers stuff a little bit. We're going to talk about how things are changing on Underdog a little bit. We're going to start, though, with round one. Justin Herzig is here.
He's here.
He's here and he's tilted.
You sound like you're breathing hard. Did you just literally manually fix the internet or something?
I ran into the car because I was going to go over to parents' house who live not too far away, so I could jump on. And then as I'm getting in the car, my wife has a sprained ankle, so I'm grabbing all of her stuff, and she's in the middle of a call. And then the internet was we're going to start working again. So don't worry about it, guys. We're good.
Justin, you've won the 200K last year. That can't get you some good internet.
All that got me was a belt. Literally, that money's already gone. All we have to hold is just the belt. All those NFTs, you just
it's so good. Okay. We are glad to have Justin here. Justin, I just recommended everybody read your article in which you graciously gave everyone access to all your exposures so far and your strategies. So everybody go check that out for Justin. I think, though, before we get too far into it here, we should get to Driko's draft because he had an interesting round one pick. I think it's a bit not what I would have done personally. I don't think it's bad by any stretch, but not what I would have done. Leone, will you scroll back and just go through 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 until we get to Driko at 1.6? So CMC, Dalvin, pretty standard. I understand Kelsey at 3 in best ball would not do it in managed. Hope you guys listened to the podcast Leone and I did talking about managed versus best ball. Saquon, okay, you have the injury concern, whatever. Zeke, that's where he goes now. At 1.5, I don't have a problem with that. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Our man, Driko, goes with Stephon Diggs. I don't know if this was to pander to Leone's Bills homerism. I like Steph Diggs. I have no problem, but I likely would have gone with the big dog. I think that the RB anchor teams in round one look better to me. I don't necessarily have a problem with this, though. Leone, what was your first reaction to seeing Driko go Steph Diggs at 1.6 over the big dog, over Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, maybe I don't have the proper imagination, but I'm going big dog here. I think every time, getting him at 1.6 is pretty good, especially in half PPR format. So a little bit better than full PPR for Henry. I do want to note, and we're going to talk about this a little bit, the rooms have gotten a little bit wide receiver heavier, which I'm interested in Justin's thoughts on that. I have some thoughts on that. And he made it work. I think the team at the end worked out really well. I also did a podcast with Pat Carrain up on Establish the Edge, posted that this morning, where he's got Antonio Gibson as one of the few backs he thinks can have this absolutely nuclear league winning season. And it's tough. How much do you weigh the chances of Gibson having that because he's got this pass catching element that Derrick Henry doesn't have versus, odds on, if you're just comparing the two, Derrick Henry's going to hit 20 fantasy points per game at a much higher rate than Antonio Gibson is going to. So, the Diggs Gibson 2v2 versus Henry Metcalf, for example, right next to it, is somewhat interesting. I don't think he gets killed there, but I would have started with Henry personally.
Yeah, Justin, what did you think about taking Steph Diggs there ahead of Derrick Henry, ahead of Alvin Kamara? And also, I would note that I personally prefer Tyreek Hill to Steph Diggs. So if I was going wide receiver there, I would have personally gone Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think what jumps out to me is, I mean, we know Driko, he won ETR Discord member of the month, which means he's very active. I know he's done a bunch of drafts. So my question is, when you've got a large enough portfolio, if you want to get Diggs, just wait a couple drafts until you finish in that 9 spot or whatever. Like, this was a rare draft where the guys that we think are 3 and 4 were available at the 6. So you're already like, maybe he's thinking, oh, I'm going to grab Diggs because that's going to be unique because I'm grabbing, at that very beginning. But you grab Derrick Henry at the 6th spot, now you're unique. Who knows what falls to you in that second, and you might be able to get a good combo there that, not many people have, just because we're not seeing Derrick Henry fall to that 6th spot very often. But I do agree with Leone that at the end of the day, I don't hate the draft. Like, it worked out, but there's small edges that I think are missed here and there that we can kind of discuss.
Sure. I wanted to get your guys' take on Alvin Kamara. I think, I've tweeted a couple of times my concerns about Alvin Kamara. You see him fall to 1.8 here. We still have him ranked in the top 4, and obviously that's a consensus of Silva and everybody else on staff. I personally have Alvin Kamara behind a bunch of these guys. I would take Tyreek Hill over Alvin Kamara, et cetera, et cetera. I kind of outlined why on the pod with Silva yesterday. My main concern with Alvin Kamara is every time Taysom Hill takes a snap, the RB target rate and the RB completion percentage is going to go down so much. Every time Taysom Hill comes in at the goal line, Alvin Kamara's goal line chances go down so much. We only have him for around 45% of the carries anyways, and around 14% of the targets anyways. It's not that different of a role from what Aaron Jones has. So, Leone, we've held strong, though, with Alvin Kamara in the top 4. Have you reconsidered that at all? We see him go 1.8 here.
I think the big thing is all the backs sort of have some question marks after the top 2 backs. So does Kamara have question marks? Yeah. And I'm starting to get a little bit more concerned, as it seems like the odds of Jameis winning the job seem a little bit lower than they were. And I personally prefer Jameis in that role, where I think you get vultured a little bit less, although they could still mix in Taysom by the goal line. But I think the RB targets are a little bit safer with Jameis. But I still think Alvin Kamara is just a special type of player. And some of the data from last year with Taysom, like there was that one Denver game where Kendall Hinton was the quarterback for Denver, and they ran. I mean, it was like a high school game. They were just running the clock out from the start. That, like, if we take that game out, he had one bad target game early. Then he had the Denver game, and people were like super panicking. And then they forgot, like, he had a couple games where the targets were absolutely fine with Taysom. So
One game. He had a 0 catch game with Taysom. He had a 2 catch game with Taysom on 3 targets, I believe. And then I threw out the Denver game. And then he had the 10 target game in the last one.
So like the average amount of targets of those 3 games is like fine though. So, and the 14% target share, like that's heavily discounted from what is in the past, like that's baked in.
Right. And I'm more likely to trust the larger sample size of the way that the Saints have used Kamara across his career over the small sample size of, hey, we got to bring in Taysom. Let's figure out what Taysom can do best, and not having that off season to kind of jive. But at the end of the day, for me, as Leone said, like, yeah, everyone's got question marks here. But the thing is, you kind of have to, to really have a chance at this, you got to try to hit on that first round. And grabbing someone like a wide receiver at the top of it, they need to not only finish as the wide receiver 1, but they need to have an amazing season to really make up for it. And you need to then hit on at least 1, likely 2 running backs later on. So that's where, I'm not wearing the double condoms. Because I think that's what it sounds like for you is you're scared that, Kamara's not going to work out. That's fine. He may not work out, but we're drafting for he does. And when he does, he has the chance to still finish. I don't know, depending on injuries, maybe number 1, but he still has the opportunity to finish top 2, top 3 running back of the year.
Yeah. And to be clear, I have no problem with it in this format. I was talking more to people in managed leagues who this is their whole year is, would you take Alvin Kamara 3rd overall? They have one team with their buddies from home, and there's so much opportunity cost in round 1. I would dump Alvin Kamara down a bit in that format. Just me.
Agreed. And elite wide receivers are so much more valuable in managed leagues,
right,
where you have to choose who you're starting. You can't just make up for it with depth and say, I've got 9 wide receivers on my team. Just figure out who does well that week.
Exactly. Leone, scroll over to the 12 spot because I want to talk about the Cam Akers thing for a second. I know a lot of you guys probably out there have Cam Akers. You're tilting your face off right now. I think people need to understand that this whole like don't draft early because of what Cam Akers happened to Cam Akers thing is just silly because it's an even playing field. Darryl Henderson was just as likely to get hurt as Cam Akers was. It's literally just bad luck. I think what we can talk about now, though, Leone, is what you did the 2-minute drill on today. Should we be taking Darryl Henderson now? Because there are a lot of teams out there, tons of teams out there who have Darryl Henderson as a 10th round pick, an 11th round pick, as a 12th round pick. Would you now spend a 4th round pick on Darryl Henderson? Leone, go ahead and recap what you talked about on the 2-minute pod.
Yeah, this is where I've learned from Justin. I've learned from Eric Bimeford to, really attack this like a tournament, channel my DFS mindset a little bit more. In the past, I would be like, I'm just trying to build the best team possible. If Darryl Henderson fits it, I'm still going to take Darryl Henderson. But if you think about it in a tournament setting, especially one of, this gargantuan size, so top heavy with $1 million prize up top, if you were in a DFS tournament like this, and there were people that had Darryl Henderson in their DraftKings lineups at 4K, you wouldn't play him at 6K, even if he was a good value, because you can't beat the 4K teams. It doesn't mean you can't beat the 4K teams at all, but you're very unlikely to beat the 4K teams with Darryl Henderson. You're kind of at that point fading Darryl Henderson and hoping he does poorly because you're trying to optimize your chances of winning, within the constraints you're working. So I'm on fade Henderson. Like if he fell to a certain point, like the 8th round where it wasn't this huge discount, I would take him. But there's 12 people in your league. Somebody's going to pull the trigger early. We saw this with Tyreek Hill when that stuff went down. Like someone's always going to take him around where he would go in a regular draft.
Yeah. Justin, do you agree with that we have to be out on Darryl Henderson going forward now?
Yeah, I think out at his current ADP because his ADP is going to settle probably pretty similar to where it's going to settle for redraft leagues. And when you're looking at that, we look at, okay, so my guess is he's going to be around Chris Carson, Miles Sanders, maybe David Montgomery. You have to have so much confidence that he is a better pick than those because A, at the end of the day, we're probably 50-50 on who's the better pick out of those. But you have to be so confident that he's better than all of those because if you do win your league with him, he's probably doing it with a great season, which means everyone in the playoffs that also had him as a great season but got him in the 12th round is there as well, and they have stronger teams. So now we're giving up the also contrarian and the unique value. Like, we used the Kamara example in my lineup last year. Like it was so valuable just because he was the only one. Stephon Diggs, he had a huge game in that week 16 as well, but he was also on like 30% of teams because he had such a big year. We want to find the guys that, hey, when we're in those playoffs, we want to be unique. So we're already sacrificing that uniqueness and taking and we're already taking a bit of a back seat to these better lineups.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move to round 2. Our man Driko comes on the clock here. He could have taken Aaron Jones, who I know Justin is a fan of. He could have taken Joe Mixon. He decides to go with Antonio Gibson. I certainly have no problem with that. I likely would have gone Aaron Jones, and mainly because I do think Aaron Rodgers is going to end up playing for the Packers. I can't say for sure, but it feels like it's heading towards that direction. Justin, what do you think of going Antonio Gibson here over Mixon, over Aaron Jones?
Yeah, I would go Mixon. So I do have it as Mixon, Aaron Jones. I think ETR has it the other way. But I think I'm still just baking in that small amount of risk of the AJ deal. Like Joe Mixon doesn't have any competition. Mm-hmm. Joe Mixon is just a bet that the offensive line isn't atrocious and that the Bengals are going to be a strong team. Because if they are, he's getting a ridiculous amount of the workload. He's going to have a substantial role. And when you're getting in the second round, like, yeah, we talk about the Ezekiel Elliott had like a 15 points per game last year, but only got you a 2% win rate. That's because he was being drafted in the top 5 picks. Here, you're getting someone in the second round that gives you hey, if he has not, Joe Mixon just has one of those 15, 17 point games, points per game, his win rate's going to be higher because your draft capital is lower. And if he has one of those monster seasons, he has the amount of volume and that offense is potentially has enough upside that he could still finish as a top 3, top 5 overall back. That's why I'm choosing him. That said, if you're choosing Gibson, if you're choosing Aaron Jones, I'm glad he chose a running back. It's 6 and 1 half the other for the most part.
Yeah, once he goes Steph Diggs in round 1, Leone, he has to go running back in round 2, right? Because I would have been tempted by George Kittle to try to knock out an elite tight end, but I think once you go wide receiver in round 1, you almost have to go running back in round 2.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of like full 0 RB teams. If I'm doing it, it's going to be if I'm getting like Devontae Adams and Diggs at the turn sometimes, where I might have the number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. I only have to take 7. I can take a lot of running backs. I think it's a little early for Kittle. As much as I like Kittle, I'm probably still taking the running back. And to Justin's point about like the win rate analysis is really good, but there is kind of like too much being made of that weird Zeke season with a 2.7% win rate. Josh Jacobs is another guy that I am not a pro Josh Jacobs guy, but he had an ADP in the second round, and he was on his percentage of teams that made it to the tournament round, according to Hayden Winks, like was above average. And he had just a mediocre season. And like, that's part of the point behind hyper fragile is you're getting these scores in your lineup all the time. Assuming the guy stays healthy, the scores in your lineup are counting basically each week because the way you're structuring team, you're not wasting a lot of points. And there's a lot of value in that, even if that season itself isn't that great, which is, again, one of the big differences between managed and best ball.
And on a micro level, if you were taking Ezekiel Elliott, that means you didn't get Dalvin, didn't get Derrick Henry. Those two had such a high win rate. So just by result, Zeke's is going to be substantially lower. If you look at Josh Jacobs, I believe he was going in that late second, early third. So a lot of those teams also probably got the Zeke or Dalvin at the top of the lineup, which gives them a major boost. So much of the early draft picks, your win rate is correlated to who are the other players that are being drafted in those first 2-3 rounds.
Yeah, I'd be really careful using that win rate data. Make sure you think about it in the way that Justin just talked about it, not just in a total vacuum with the win rate data. The only other thing I'd say about the first 2 rounds here is, he takes Steph Diggs at 1.6. I think that Calvin Ridley might be like 49% to outscore Steph Diggs this year. Like Calvin Ridley, I think is going to absolutely smash. And he goes at 2.5. And I think you're behind pretty good there when you have, I wouldn't have taken Kamara, but you know what I mean, Calvin and Son and somebody really good versus, or if it was Calvin and Derrick Henry versus Steph Diggs and Antonio Gibson, I definitely prefer Calvin and Derrick Henry. Okay. Comes back to us in round 3. Terry McLaurin, another Washington player, goes to Driko. Justin, what do you think of going Terry McLaurin here? He goes back-to-back with Washington guys. Does it set you up for a Washington football team stack with Ryan Fitzpatrick, or how are you thinking about it once you have 2 football team guys if you like the McLaurin pick?
Yeah, no, I think that's a strong pick. I think it was probably very close to best available from an ADP stance. I think Allen Robinson may be slightly above him, but when you already have Gibson, you're making a bet on that Washington offense. So it makes sense. Hey, let's also make a bet on the top wide receiver there. I think it's interesting because after that 3rd pick, you can map out what this draft is going to look like. Because if you're going Diggs, you definitely want to grab that Josh Allen. And we'll see what he grabs later on. But now you've also got 2 Washington. And we're probably going to set up for a Josh Allen, Ryan Fitzpatrick. And when I think about quarterbacks, an elite guy with a later guy that can have some spike weeks, like that's a good combo. This is where, like, after you grab that 3rd one, this draft is starting to feel pretty decent. Gave up that little value early on, but like I don't hate where it's going.
Yeah. Go ahead, Leone.
I think this is where we need to talk about, some of these rooms getting very wide receiver heavy and how to adapt to that. Because I think he did a good job here of, even though he took Diggs early, like still hitting wide receiver, not just with McLaurin, but with Lockett and Claypool. Like that 5th round starting to get really tough with receivers. And I've been in some wide receiver heavy drafts. It's a little bit easier if you get caught behind the wide receiver run. Like it's a little bit tougher to make up those points versus at running back, especially if you go, this is why I like grabbing a real stud running back early, because I think you have some flexibility to play with it based on what your room does. Like you can fill in some running back values later. And part of that too is because you can only take so many running back values. So if it's a really wide receiver heavy draft and there's a team here in the 3rd team overall, they took Aaron Jones at 210, CH33, very good values, have no problem with that. But then he goes Javonte Williams, Kareem Hunt. Like these are guys that look like values at their ADPs, but you have to stop because you just can't load up with that many running backs. And then he adds on 2 more running backs, James Robinson, Leonard Fournette, who like weren't even that good of ADP values. Like that's where you really get into trouble. Whereas a team that goes wide receiver heavy early, like Driko, he fills his wide receivers. So then when he hits his running back run, when he needs to, the wide receivers have fallen off quite a bit already and are starting to be wide receivers that are going like really far ahead of ADP. So I think he did a fairly decent job of playing the wide receiver heavy room. Curious Justin's thoughts on the wide receiver heavy rooms.
Before you go, Justin, let me identify some of these, where these running backs were going. And this was a puppy draft, I believe, actually not a BBM. So our mistake there, but still Miles Sanders at 5.1, Najee Harris 3.9, CEH 3.3, Myles Gaskin 7.12, James Conner 10.9, Javonte Williams 6.1, Kareem Hunt 7.3. Just in a vacuum, you can see that due to the wide receiver thirst and people starting to understand how much more valuable wide receivers are in this format, you're getting these outrageous values, at least in a vacuum. It's a hard from a roster construction standpoint. But Justin, how are you playing when you can get these really good running backs who I think we like? I mean, is it really the dead zone if Miles Sanders is going at 5.1? You know what I mean? Is it really the dead zone if Najee Harris is going at 3.9? Are you following what I'm saying?
100%. And I got to admit, like I've done 100 plus of these Best Ball Mania ones, and I've never seen this much falling. Like Najee Harris at 3.9 is smash value. I'm taking him in the third round all day, especially if that gives me as a third running back. And now I'm done with like running backs for the day. And yeah, I mean, even David Montgomery at 5.7, like it's just decent value. That's all falling, and you gotta take it. And trying to figure out, like, so I guess people just started reaching on the wide receivers here. That kind of dragged them down a little. Even the QBs fell a bit. I mean, yeah, I guess like look at these guys that were going in fifth round. Michael Gallup. Like, I love Gallup, but not as a fifth rounder. That's 48 plus 5, 53. Like, that's so early. And I guess the person just really wanted to build that Dak stack. But like, I have Gallup in the 8th round with a Cooper or CeeDee Lamb stack too. So like, you're just really reaching to get that stack, and I don't love it.
Yeah. The hard part, I said this to Adam before the show, but like if you were doing an experiment and got super extreme, if everyone drafted running backs early except for you, like I think you'd end up okay. You know, like you'd be able to figure it out. If everyone drafted wide receivers early except for you, I don't know if you'd be okay even with the quantity over quality. Now, it's not happening on quite those extremes. That's just like a thought experiment that helps me think through that. But to Justin's points, there's all these running back values falling. It's kind of with running backs, it's picking this spot where you just have to pick and choose your spots, I guess is my point, because you can't take all of them. You know, if you start 3 running backs out of the gate and you want to build your wide receivers, what are you doing in rounds 5 through 10? Like, it gets a little bit tough if everyone has taken receivers. And I
think the zag that people would be thinking about or proposing would be like, let's say you started Tyreek Hill, Steph Diggs, and then it looks like the dead zone in round 3, 4, 5, but it's really not anymore because you get CEH, Najee, Miles Sanders, right? So let's say you started with something crazy like that. Wouldn't that be a winning roster? Tyreek, Steph Diggs, and then 3 running backs that really fall like crazy to these crazy ADPs. That's the kind of zag that I at least was thinking about as these wide receivers are all just getting sucked up so early.
Yeah, I mean, if you could guarantee that 100%, I think this is just an outlier to see Najee going anywhere in the 3rd round outside of like the first 2 picks of that round. Miles Sanders we definitely see in the 4th round, but definitely not the 5th. And I guess it was 5-1, so it was similar. But
okay. Go ahead, man.
I've got Miles Sanders at the 5. I would say the problem is too, like, you don't know what room you're in until you know the 3rd through 6th round. So that's why I still like getting the elite running back early. But like I have sometimes at the turn, instead of going double elite running back, I've taken one and one of the best receivers just to keep that open. Like, maybe Dobbins falls at 3-4 turn, like those types of things.
Yeah. Okay. Let's keep it moving here. Gets back to our man Driko in round 4. He goes Tyler Lockett, who I like very much. On a micro level, gets him in round 5. He takes Chase Claypool. Now, he has 4 wide receivers and 1 running back through the first 5 rounds. It's certainly a construction that we like. Justin, what do you think about those back-to-back wide receiver picks there of Lockett and Claypool?
Yeah, so I mean, pick 54, so 48-6. 54 was Chase Claypool. Josh Allen's ADP is like 51, 52. So that was a bold move to not grab Josh Allen there. I'm all about not reaching for your stack QB counterpart, but I think I definitely would have gone Josh Allen there since I'm already overspent on Diggs. Like, I'm investing in this stack, so I would have grabbed it. Props to you for getting Josh Allen in that next round and for people allowing this to happen. And in that fact, the thing to me is I've actually been going, if I have one of the first 4-6 picks, I'm almost now starting to get an elite QB every time, because the other options compared to those QBs is not that much different from the wide receivers that are going in the Chase Claypool versus the Visca, Jarvis, and that gap in between, I think is pretty tight. So if I have the opportunity, I'm probably trying to grab one of these Josh Dak, Kyler Lamars. and just set myself up to say like, hey, maybe I'm giving up a tiny bit of wide receiver value, but I'm still going to hammer those wide receivers later on. What he did though, amazing, worked out, good job.
Yeah. Leone, he has the Josh Allen to dig stack. I assume that means he gets an A from you in his draft review.
Of course. But I feel very similarly to Justin, where a lot of the times this 5th round, like after T. Higgins is like, there's like T. Higgins and Thielen. And then like even Ayuk, as much as I love him, like he's starting to go early 5. It's early. And I really turn to the onesie positions where I'm either getting elite quarterback or like I'd rather reach a little bit on Andrews and Hawkinson. As you know, doing drafts with Justin has taught me like thinking through like the 2v2. It's like I can get Hawkinson or Andrews a lot of times at the 5-6 turn. And then at the 7-8 turn, you know, even in a wide receiver thirsty room, like Juju goes, you know, we had Brandon Cooks go late, Jarvis go late. Like, I don't think there's a massive difference between them and Claypool, especially in best ball when you've already have wide receivers early and the way the distributions work. Like, there's a diminishing point of returns where in a managed league, like maybe I'd take an extra shot at Claypool's breakout upside, but in best ball, like I don't know how many points you're really adding to your roster. It did, and again, kudos to him because it did work out.
Yeah. I mean, getting Josh Allen at 6.7. By the way, Silva just moved Josh Allen into his QB1 spot overall in his top 150. And so to get Josh Allen 6.7 when guys like Joe Burrow are going 7.8, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And Mahomes, I didn't see where Mahomes went. I'm sure he went in the 3rd or 4th round too. And so, you know, just unbelievable to get Josh Allen there. Now, through 6 rounds, Driko only has one running back. It is Antonio Gibson. He immediately steps on the gas pedal with running backs here: Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, Michael Carter. I'm okay with all of them in a vacuum. I'm certainly not excited about it, but that's kind of the point, right? When you do this kind of construction. Justin, what do you think about going RB, RB, RB here? And on a micro level, what do you think about the picks?
Yeah, so let's scroll down. Does he finish with 4 or 5 running backs? Because I think that influence. Because I think he ended up with just 4.
I think he goes 4.
Which, you know, I'm a big proponent of 4. But if I'm grabbing Diggs in the 1st, I'm probably thinking that I'm going to try to grab 5 running backs this draft. Just need a little more when you don't have that kind of true anchor or that's even elite 2nd running back. In that situation, what I'm looking to do is there's a dead zone in the, I'd say, rounds 11 to 13, where all the running backs are pretty similar and the wide receivers all have substantial question marks. And I kind of think of it as like right after that Jalen Reagor, Gabriel Davis. So in my mindset, I'm still probably not going 3 here. I'm probably grabbing 1, maybe 2, knowing I'm grabbing 2 more in that dead wide receiver zone later on. That said, from a player-wise, I love Chase Edmonds. The Arizona offense, that running game was just so efficient the past year that we're making a bet that the news reports are right, that Chase Edmonds really has that starter job. And if that's the case, he should be going in the 4th round. Now, I know that they've been very hesitant to use him around the goal line. I understand that's a place that James Conner can kind of, fit in and take away from Edmonds a bit. But I think Edmonds is a fantastic from a running back upside play where if things work out, if he does get a bit more of that kind of workload, we know the offense is heavy efficient with Kyler back there in the running game. I love that pick.
Yeah. 7.6 is ridiculous for Chase Edmonds too. Go ahead, Leone, on these back-to-back running back picks.
Well, we know that we want to attack ambiguous backfields, and JJ Zachariason recently did some research that said there's like a surprisingly strong hit rate if you take the RB1 in an ambiguous backfield when both running backs are going in like this 7th through 10th round range. And I had early in my drafts been just taking James Conner at a discount to Edmonds, but this is kind of reinforced to me that I need to be a little bit more aggressive and swing at Edmonds' upside because he is the RB1 by ADP. And what JJ's research says is like the market's been pretty good on that. And I think Mostert, you can make the argument where him and Sermon are so close that it's a very similar type bet. Now, Michael Carter is the RB1 in an ambiguous backfield, but it's not a high value backfield. The RB2 there is going very late, whether it's Ty Johnson or Tevin Coleman at the very end of drafts. And that's the pick too, where I agree with Justin, where I would have made this a 5 running back build and probably taken a better wide receiver there, and then taken, a couple running backs. You're kind of like where we see him go Jacoby Myers-ish, like Zach Moss went in round 11. Like I probably would have waited there.
Yeah. I'd say I was on the Connor over Edmonds train as well, but that was when Connor was going, when Edmonds was going in like round 5. Now, if you can get him in round 6 and Connor goes in round 10, I mean, it's a no-brainer to take Chase Edmonds there. Way better value than James Conner in round 10. Okay. Driko has 4 running backs now, and now he's like, well, let's step back on the gas pedal with wide receivers. I do like Rondale Moore in a vacuum. Gabe Davis is part of a Josh Allen stack. I'm not sure where Gabe Davis's ADP is right now. I'm not sure if that was a reach or not, but I do like Gabe Davis in general.
Leone,
and one thing I just want to point out, like Michael Carter, like he could have taken Logan Thomas there. You know, he doesn't have a tight end at this point. It's the Washington football team stack. I probably would have taken Logan Thomas, you know, not a wide receiver at that 9-6 pick.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even cross my mind. You didn't have a tight end yet. Let's talk about that in general, Herzig. What do you think about not taking a tight end until we get all the way to round 14 here?
So what you're basically doing is guaranteeing that you're going to grab 3. When you know you're grabbing 3, I'm a little more okay with waiting as long as possible because I think from an actual like projections wise, the difference between Mike Gesicki and Hunter Henry is not much more than a coin flip. Logan Thomas at the beginning, I had him in that tier above. I have more recently dropped him down a bit. I just think there's just going to be so many mouths to feed in that offense, and new quarterback adds doubt. That said, when I have Gibson, when I have Mclaren, yeah, Logan Thomas was the smash spot in this play, and just reaffirm that you're going for that Washington stack to complement the Josh Allen.
Yeah. Okay. So let's scroll back up on Driko's team a little bit there. Okay, Rondale, Gabe Davis was a slight reach, but it's okay to complete the stack.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. Now we have Josh Allen already. We go Justin Fields here, passing on tight end. Yet again, passing on a 5th running back. Obviously, I think 12.7 is great value for Justin Fields. Leone, you've been on the Justin Fields train for what seems like months now. What do you think of this pick?
Yeah, I will say that like the Fields and Lance ADPs are starting to get like I'm wondering if we're jumping the shark and not drafting enough Trevor Lawrence. I've started to mix him more, but 12-7's a great spot to get Fields. This is where you run into that problem, though, kind of what Justin was talking about, where you got this dead area to an extent where if he had taken Logan Thomas instead of Michael Carter, he could have maybe hit a running back here and waited to take Fitzpatrick. But in general, I don't have a problem with Fields. It's a rushing quarterback with a lot of upside. The value is really good. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what Justin has because I don't feel strongly one way or the other on this pick.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at his ADP. I mean, in a vacuum, so you got him at 1 pick, 139, which I think is pretty good. He's 133, so not smash, but pretty good value. But the thing is, I think you saw that value, saw the Fields vacuum upside, and said, I want him. But the thing is, you don't have Allen Robinson, you don't have Darnell Mooney. They've already been drafted. Yes, you can do that Cole Kmet stack later on, but overall, there's better teams you can do with Fields. And what happened to the Ryan Fitzpatrick? We already started with those 2 elite guys early on. If your team's going to be good, it's going to be because your top running back and your top wide receiver are going to have great years, which also means Fitzpatrick is probably going to have a pretty solid year as well. Wait on that. That's where I think, hey, once you grab Fields, you can't grab the Fitzpatrick anymore. And agreed. I think I don't want to go because agreed. This would have a great spot for one of those value running backs. Otherwise, I think just load up on grab another wide receiver. You never can have too many at this spot. And it also allows you, since you already know you're going 3 tight end, to get those later.
Yeah. What running backs do you guys like in this range here? Because I think people struggle with this range of running back and who to take. I don't really like taking James White. I know some people do, but what do you think, Leone?
Well, Jamal Williams, when that Anthony Lynn comment came out, people were going nuts and drafting him in the 8th round. I don't mind the 13th round Jamal Williams. I don't mind Madison here at all as a really high upside handcuff. And at that point, the discount on him is pretty sometimes the pure handcuff guys go a little bit too early, but he could have taken Jamal Williams and Madison in 12, 13 and, Logan Thomas in round 9. And I probably would have liked that better. And then Fitzpatrick later, something like that.
Yeah, I would say Latavius Murray is going 134. I can't tell if he's available here, but that's about that ADP.
Yeah, he went 12.3 here.
He would have just missed Latavius.
Okay, so then Nyheim Hines is probably
Hines. I like Hines. I like Singletary too. This is Justin's point. There's just a lot of backs that you can bet on.
Mm-hmm. And Singletary gives you the decent stack. You already have the Josh Allen. So we saw Devin Singletary that one silly game where he made the kind of juke move on the right-hand side and had the touchdown. Like, he has some receiving chops. I'm not on Devin Singletary. I don't want much of that running back backfield, but when you're this late in the draft, you already have a stack. I don't mind grabbing him either.
Why don't you put up Driko's question here, Leone? Let's let him speak here as we continue to bash his team. Let him get his word in. I'm not sure exactly what he means here, but certainly if you get LT3 and you have Fitzpatrick with Mclaren and Gibson, it would be a really nice stack, I think. I don't know. Do you need to have LT3 to have an elite season for it not to be a losing bet?
I think I think his concern here is if it's a stack that the way the points are distributed, that Logan Thomas can't have the elite season with the whole stack going off. But I've definitely seen like pretty high correlations with tight end, quarterback, and the very first article I wrote for Establish the Run. The stacks with tight ends didn't do great last year from the pure data, but there were a lot of like really nuanced reasons for why that was the case. You know, the huge seasons from Travis Kelce and Darren Waller being at the top of the list, and some guys that did well with undrafted quarterbacks in best ball. I don't know. I think that's overthinking it a little bit. I would take the correlation. You're just really hoping for a very strong, consistent season out of Logan Thomas where you can use his score the vast majority of the time. Like, it's not like you're getting elite tight end season by waiting anyways. You know, it's not getting so.
Yeah,
I think it's, and I had this concern too when we did our, like our industry draft with Underdog. I said to Justin, like, I was a little worried. I was like, should I take Marquise Brown? We already have Dobbins and Anders. Like, and I was just kind of overthinking it. It's like, if the offense does really well, the distribution is going to work out in your favor. It's not like you have to start all three guys every single week. Like, that's best ball.
That was my point. It's not like DFS where you can't have a stack of four because there's no way all four guys go off. If this, they're going to pick for you. Underdog will pick for you the guy that goes off in the given week. So you can stack more guys. I think that's more the way I would think about it. But yeah, what do you think about what he was saying about Logan Thomas, Justin?
Yeah, it's just 9th, 10th round value of a tight end. Like, you don't need a 9th or 10th round value to have an elite season to still be a productive pick, especially within your stack. Then a tight end, you don't need to have an elite season to be a productive part of your stack. Like, it's not hard for a tight end to be valuable and have a decent win rate on your team just by being part of a better offense. And so that's where our larger bet is. If Washington ends up averaging 27, 30 points a game, like, yeah, it's unlikely, like in that week 17 that we care about, that Mclaren, that Gibson, and Logan Thomas are all going to have huge games, and Fitzpatrick. But if 2 out of those 3 do, you're still in a great position. And hey, we still have the rest of the team that can kind of make up for it. But across the whole season, I'm betting on the production and the upside of an offense. And so give me as many pieces within reason.
Yep. All right. Let's go to the end here, see how Driko wrapped it up. He went back-to-back tight ends who I think both have a reasonable amount of upside. I'm not certainly not in love with either, but I think they're both totally fine. Then he goes wide receiver with Slayton and Eskridge, who I'm both those guys I think I'm perfectly fine with. And then the last one, I don't know if this was trying to appease me, but Donald Parham, who wasn't the best all-season run out for Donald Parham. Jared Cook, I think, will struggle with the age model, but then they go use a 3rd-round pick on Trey McKitty. So I actually haven't been taking Donald Parham with my last pick very often. Then again, most of my teams are 2 tight end teams, not 3 tight end teams. So I don't really get myself into this spot very often. But Herzig, what do you think of the last few picks here from Driko?
Yeah, I'm trying to see what tight ends would have been available in round 16, but that's probably where I would have grabbed either an Austin Hooper or someone like, Hooper went pretty early too. So maybe there really was no one available in that round 16, but that also touches on the kind of dangers of depending on 3 very late tight ends. I also, once I grab Justin Fields, I'm trying to grab someone like Marquis Goodwin with my 18th. And so I'd rather have Marquis Goodwin on this team than Darius Slayton, which allows me to say, hey, I know my 18th is locked up. No one else is drafting a guy like Marquis Goodwin. So that says, okay, now in my 16th or 17th, I can focus on getting that 3rd tight end. So I'm not relegated to getting stuck with a Donald Parham.
Yeah, I have some dead Anthony Miller shares from earlier in the offseason, and I need to start replacing them with some Marquis Goodwin very late, who sounds like he's been performing well. And if we want to play hashtag better in best ball, he is the deep threat that could maybe break a couple long ones throughout the course of the season. I would only draft him in stacks, but it's something I have been meaning to do in round 18.
Okay, so Driko ends up with a 2-4-9-3, 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 9 wide receivers, and 3 tight ends. Justin, based on your article, I know that you had done this construction a lot. Do you have a preference with this 2-4-9-3 versus any other? It seems like maybe you're doing 2-4-9-3 more than the field. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, I forgot off the top of my head, but 60-some% of my lineups only had 4 running backs, and 2-4-9-3 was definitely one of the highest. I think when I look at his team, I love his wide receivers, but I honestly think you're probably too strong at wide receiver, which kind of hurt you at your other positions. Specifically, running back and tight end just feel a little light here. Tight end, it is what it is. It's a tight end position. You've got 3. I still, Cole Kmet and Hunter Henry are fine. I just think your running backs are a little light here, because if I'm going 4 running backs, I probably want to be grabbing 1 in the first round, or at least 2 in the first kind of maybe 3 or 4 rounds.
Yeah, I have kind of touted like making these hyper fragile builds even more fragile in the big tournament. So not going to totally kill him for the 4 weakish running backs. Like I think you can get away with that, but just looking at it specifically, it just seems like it would have been much better to take Logan Thomas at that Carter pick, and then taking Devin Singletary and Alexander Madison or something, to get to the 5 running backs.
One thing I'll kind of get on the soapbox on here real quick is when I'm thinking of building these teams, we do need to win. We need to get, finish in the top 2 of our league. It's not actually that hard to finish top 2 out of 12. And so that is a thing we should be prioritizing. Sometimes when you do these really hyper fragile builds like this and you don't get running backs early, yes, this team probably has a better chance of finishing as the most regular season points than any team I've drafted. But the thing is, you could finish as the top regular season point total. And when we get to the playoffs, it's now just starting as a wash again. So we need to think of the tournament as it's so important just to advance in those early rounds, and finishing in the top, 1 out of 6, 2 out of 12 isn't that hard, but we're taking unnecessary risks when we're not giving ourselves like a strong RB backfield to kind of guide us along that way.
Yep. Okay. I think it's well said. I think that this is valuable. Again, I think that reviewing content is much better than doing the live drafts. Big shout out to Driko, who's been so active and helpful in all the channels in the Discord. If you subscribe to ETR, you have access to the Discord. I think you are missing out if you are not in the Discord. Continue to follow Leone on Twitter, where he's absolutely crushing it at 2 hats, 1 mic. Herzig, you can find him on. And Justin, what's your Twitter again? Is it just Justin Herzig?
Yep, just at Justin Herzig, Herzig.
Oh, there it is. It's on the screen already. Do not forget to claim your Underdog package. Congrats again to Driko for being a good sport here. Congrats to Driko for winning the Member of the Month. I agree with some of the comments here. Marquis Goodwin is not going to be a thing. Leone, it's enough. It's enough with Marquis Goodwin.
Flash Goodwin, man.
Stop it. Okay. For Leone, for Herzig, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.